Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about deep snapping. So I'm going to cover a few things. I'm going to cover your stance, your balance, and the control in your stance. Talk about your hand placement on the ball. Talk about where your hands should finish after you snap the ball. Talk about kind of a general target for where you want the snap to be when it reaches the punter or the holder on a PAT. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is hand placement on the ball. To start, you want to act like you're going to throw the ball. So what I've got here, you can either do 2 or 3 fingers on the laces, just like you're going to throw a football. And then your second, this is called your power hand. The hand you snap with is your power hand. And your other hand, your opposite hand, is your guide hand. Your guide hand has several different options. The first option, which is my particular favorite, is to put my middle finger right on the middle seam of the back of the ball, just like this. So kind of forms a bit of a C shape right here. The second option is a lot of people prefer to split the seam with their index finger and their middle finger to look more like this. And then the third option, which is also really popular, is to actually put your thumb in the middle of the C that's formed by your index finger and your thumb, and still keep your middle finger right there on the lace. It's totally up to you how you hold the ball, and you have to really figure out what works best for you. A lot of people wonder why you use 2 hands when you snap. A lot of high school long snappers will use 1 hand because it's just like throwing under your legs. The guide hand does a lot of things as far as placement on of the ball. Using a guide hand really allows you to keep the ball tight in your power hand, which obviously is the most important hand. The guide hand also allows you to guide. It's just kind of like shooting a basketball. You want to keep this hand there, but it's really just there to hold the ball. It's not there to use power or anything like that. So we're going to start with a little warm-up that I always do before practice each day. Just kind of warming up your arms, but also practicing your technique and your hand placement on the ball. So all I'm going to do is, the team's my target 10 yards away. All I'm going to do is shoot the ball overhand like this, and just shoot it at him and act like I'm following through with my wrist, and act like I'm snapping the ball. One of the things about deep snapping is wrist movement, and without wrist movement, the ball will not really turn. It's full angle, and you won't be able to shoot it as far if you don't have as much pop in your wrist. So one thing I'm focusing on when I'm doing this is where my hands finish. Okay, hand placement is a big part of long snapping. You always want to make sure that when you finish, your palms are facing out, your hands are pretty close to each other, but a big thing is keeping your thumbs down and your palms out. So you can see from this drill right here, that's one thing I'm focusing on, is keeping my thumbs down, my palms out. So the next drill I'm going to do is a closer range of the same drill I just showed, and this one's going to be more emphasis on the wrist movement and less emphasis on going over the head. So I'm going to start with my normal deep snapping grip. I'm going to pull the ball to my forehead, and that keeps my arms cocked, and then I'm just going to explode with my wrist out, and focus on ending with my palms out, my thumbs down. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is your stance as a deep snapper. So first thing I'm going to emphasize is about a shoulder width or a little bit wider base. You want to have a good base, not too wide where you're off balance, not too narrow where you can't get your arms all the way through your legs when you're snapping the ball. So I'm going to get a little bit wider than shoulder width. And first thing I'm going to do is make sure my toes are pointed straight ahead. You don't want your toes to be cockeyed either way. You want to make sure your feet are parallel with each other and they're in line with, your toes are in line with each other. So I'm just going to make sure my toes are right on this line. First thing I'm going to do is get into a full squat, rest my elbows on my thighs right here. It's important to have good balance. You don't want to, when you're snapping, you don't want to lean too far forwards or too far backwards. You want to really not balance at all on the ball. You just want to be balanced with yourself. So one thing I really focus on is being balanced in the arch of my feet, not on my toes, not on my heels, just a perfect balance. That way I don't fall over. So in my stance, I want to show you the side view. That way you know kind of how balanced I am. I'm not leaning too far forward, not too far backwards. I've got a perfect balance right in the middle of my arches. One thing that we emphasize is kind of a Z shape in your knee. You want to bend at the knee and at the hip. You don't want to be bent in your back only. That is really poor for posture, but also ball placement. So you want to keep your back completely flat. You want to bend at the hips and bend at the knees. Keep your back flat and reach out and then touch the ball. One thing about long snapping is you always approach the ball. You never put the ball down in front of you. So you know, in a game situation, the ball's going to be there. The ref's going to put the ball down. I approach the ball. I get my stance ready, and I approach the ball myself. I don't put the ball down. I approach the ball. I control the ball the whole way. That's why I don't lean into the ball. When I do get in my stance, I want to make sure that my face is somewhere over the ball. If you get the ball out too far, that means you're leaning too far. If the ball is behind you, then you're going to be offsides, but also you have no power from there. So you want to make sure your face is directly over the ball. I like to look at the very center of the ball, look straight down, and that's where the ball. So I'm going to go over with you just how I grip the ball before I even snap it. So I'm going to approach the ball. It's laying there. I'm going to approach it. First thing I'm going to do is get my left hand in its correct position, okay, which middle finger right in the middle of that seam. Then I'm going to twist the ball a little bit so I can get my right hand on it, just like my throwing motion. And I want to look at the very face of this ball right here. I don't want to look at either seam. I want to make sure the next thing I'm going to look at is what to do after you're already in your stance, after you've already put your hands on the ball. What do you do now? Okay, so first thing I'm going to show you without the ball, and then I'll pull the ball in and show you. Remember, you're in your good balanced stance. You have control over your body and over the ball. So I'm going to practice acting like I have a ball in my hand. So you get my forearm here, got my middle finger right on the seam. First thing you're going to do is make sure that your hands aren't on the ground. Okay, that means you're leaning on the ball if your hands are on the ground. Okay, so my hands are slightly hovering the ground. One thing I'm going to focus on is shooting my hands through and ending with my hands, palms facing out.
Thumbs up.
So it should shoot through like this. And here you can see my legs are more straight. I'm bent at the hip, almost exclusively at the hip. And I should end with my hands just like this, palms out, thumbs up. Okay, so I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to go through the motions. I got my punter about 10 yards, so I'm just kind of warming up distance. I'm going to bend down, approach the ball. Remember that I have complete control over the ball. The ball doesn't control me. So next thing, make sure I'm in line with the punter. I'm going to shoot my hands through, in with my palms out. Where am I going to snap the ball to? What is my goal where does the punter want to catch the ball? Okay, that's the end goal. That's when the ball comes out of my hand, and the job is then up to him. So first things first is the punter is going to line up with his right foot, if he's a right-footed punter, directly in line with the ball. Okay, so here's Cam, our punter. He's going to put his right foot directly in line with the ball, and my goal is to snap the ball in his right hip. Okay, so what does that do? I'm going to show you some film in a minute, but the first thing it does is it keeps everybody in line. Our scheme is a spread scheme, which means he has a specific point where he is supposed to punt the ball from. Okay, we call it our launch point. And the launch point is going to be a little bit to Cam's right, so therefore if the snap is to the left, it throws off his steps and then throws off the launch point, which means it will be more likely to get blocked. So my goal is to really keep the ball anywhere on his right side of his body. Different punters have different preferences. My goal is particularly between the middle of the right thigh and between about the right below the chest on the right side. That's my goal. Okay, that's kind of my strike zone.
Here's a clip from practice where my snap's to the left hip of the punter, not the right hip. You can tell the punter's got to take a different angle because the snap is to the left. This next clip, you're going to see a snap to the right, which allows the punter to be right in line with the shield for us to get the correct punt out of the correct launch point, which is right behind our shield. Here's two clips from games. You can see on the right side of the ball, they're really overloading the line. And so it's extremely important to get a good snap. That way the punter will have enough time to catch the ball and to move to the correct launch point and get the ball off in a timely manner. That way the punt return team doesn't have a chance to block it. You'll see on this next clip, the PBR team wasn't as aggressive, but it's still important to get a great snap so that the launch point is still right behind the shield. It's extremely important because if the snap's a little bit to the left, then the punter's angle is off and he has to mess up his steps to get the ball off.
So what I'm going to go through now is just our particular warm-up after we've done our snapping the ball overhand, after we're nice and ready to go. What I'm going to work on is shooting my hands through, getting my arms through my legs as far as possible, and making sure that the ball is hitting Cam somewhere in his torso area. Okay, so first thing, get in my stance, feet just a little bit wider than shoulder width. Grab the ball just like I was throwing it. Put my middle finger right on the opposite seam of the lace. Look through my legs and pick out my target, which is going to be the punter's right hip. I'll just do one more. Another thing I'm focusing on is trying to pop my hips without moving my feet a whole bunch. If my feet move some, that's okay, but I want to make sure when I'm snapping that my hands, wrists, elbows all move at once. You don't want to be moving your hips first and then pulling the ball through. You want to make sure that it's all one continuous motion. That way you can get a more consistent spot, location, speed of the ball. One thing you always want to emphasize is more arm movement than leg movement. Some leg movement is good, but you want to have a majority of the motion coming from your arms itself, because your arms are your hands, your wrists, that's what guides the ball. So one thing I'm going to focus on particular is moving my hands all at once and not making and not having different like my hips move first, my arms move first. I want to be able to make sure that everything's moving at once, make it one continuous motion, and making sure that my hands finish where my palms are out and my thumbs are finishing up. Another thing I want to focus on is shooting my hips, but not shooting my hips so much that my feet move a great deal. So it's okay, obviously, to use your hips. If you're a young snapper, you're going to need more hips because your arms may not have the strength yet to snap the ball 14 yards. So you want to emphasize mostly arm snapping the ball with your arms and using your hips just a little bit. So I'm gonna, after I snap this ball, I'm gonna freeze my hands, my hips, and my legs, so you can kind of see where I'm ending at from the side. So you can see my hands, my palms are completely out, my thumbs are completely up, my arms are as straightened out as possible. They're all the way through my legs as far as I can get them. My legs are mostly straight, and I'm basically just bent at the hips. So I'm kind of creating a T-like shape with my legs and my arms shooting through. And I want to make sure that when my hands finish, that I can see the punter in between my hands. So I want you to see what I see. So from my view, I see the back of my hands just like this view. I can see the back of my hands facing each other. They're not too far apart. They're not one up, one down. They're not too high, not too low. They're just basically right there in the middle. And I finish with my hands basically around the punter. Okay, so here's kind of what I will see in a punt snap. So got my stance ready to go. My hands are hovering the ground. Make sure you're not leaning. Your hips are locked and loaded. Your knees are locked. So here is what you're going to see from my point of view. At the NFL level and moving down, even at the college level and even a lot of high school teams, they'll use a 14-yard punt snap. That's just kind of regular. So now that I'm warmed up, I've snapped a few balls over my head. I've snapped the ball at 12 yards, just kind of getting warmed up. Now I'm actually going to go through my progression as if I was in a game, snapping 14 yards to my punter. I want to emphasize a few more things. I got my stance a little bit outside shoulder width. I'm balanced right in my arch. I'm bent down. My hips and my knees are locked and loaded. Grab the ball like I'm throwing it. Put my middle finger right on the opposite seam of the laces. I look through my legs to see my punter and pick out my target. Pick my head back up and look at the ball and shoot it. I'll do it one more time. Here I'm going to be working on a 7-yard PAT or field goal snap instead of a 14-yard punt snap. Basically the mechanics are the same, except for the fact you're only snapping at 7 yards instead of 14. So one thing I'm going to focus on is again looking straight down at the football. And instead on this one, you want to look the whole way because you have a more precise target. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking right at Ryan's inside elbow. So my goal is to snap the ball right here. That's where I want the ball to hit because if he's ready to catch the ball, then likely his hands, go ahead and move your hands like you're going to catch the ball. His hands are going to be right there, which is from my angle, basically where his elbow would be. So I'm just going to go through kind of 1 or 2 snaps right here, showing you what a field goal PAT snap would look like. So the mechanics are basically the same. I'm just looking the whole way. I'm looking right at Ryan's left elbow.
So I've got a few clips from practicing games to show you. You'll notice on these that my aiming spot is right inside his elbow, just like I mentioned. But location on a field goal PAT snap is extremely important because it allows the holder to put the ball down to give the kicker an opportunity to make a field goal, to make a PAT. So it's really big for allowing the kicker to then do his job. A lot of the role of a long snapper, deep snapper, is to put the ball in the right location for the kicker or the punter to do his job and give the team an advantage, a chance to win. So here you can see the placement's really important on these, trying to get the ball right at the elbow of the holder. Here's a game clip that you can kind of see. The placement is important for the long snapper, so that makes the holder's job extremely easy. Here's just a few reminders. Your hand placement before the snap, make sure your power hand is on the laces, your guide hand is on the opposite seam. And your stance, make sure you're balanced through your arches. You have complete control of the ball, your back's flat, your hips are locked and loaded, and you're not leaning forwards or backwards. Now in your follow through, make sure your target is the punter's kicking leg hip, usually the right side. Your arms are completely straight in your follow through, your palms are facing out, and your thumbs are pointing up. Mechanics on a field goal snap, make sure your target is the holder's inside elbow, and it's all about location.